My name is Claire Halston. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a senior compliance auditor for a hospital network in Northern Virginia. Last Thanksgiving, my father smiled and called my brother our only real investment in front of exactly 28 relatives. I remember the way the overhead chandelier light hit the gravy boat, and the way my hands went so cold I couldn't feel the fork. My mother didn't correct him. She just kept passing rolls like she could feed the moment until it went away. 14 years earlier, my parents paid $92,600 for my brother's tuition, wire transfer, same day, no hesitation. When I asked for help with my own degree, my father leaned back in his chair, looked at me like I was pitching a bad business idea and said, "You don't need degrees, just find a husband." I can still hear the ice clinking in his glass after he said it. I can still feel how the room went quiet in that specific way families get quiet when they know something wrong just happened, but they're hoping the person who got hurt will swallow it. I swallowed it. And then I started saving everything. Every receipt. Every email. Every, "we'll talk later." Every time they forgot me. Every time they remembered my brother. I didn't know it then, but the folder I built in silence would become the only thing that could save them. Because now, at 32, my father needed me. And my answer was exactly 4 words. Before I continue, if you end up liking this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to the summer everything started. My family looked normal from the outside. 2-story house, white siding, hydrangeas that my mother trimmed like a ritual. A neighborhood where everyone smiled at each other and then compared each other's lives in private. Inside, we had a hierarchy. My father, Peter Halston, ran the house like a board meeting. He loved phrases like return on investment and strategic decisions, even when he was talking about people. He worked in finance for a defense contractor, and he always smelled faintly of coffee and aftershave, like he'd built a personality out of routine. My mother, Diane, was softer. She was the kind of woman who could make an apology sound like a lullaby. She didn't hit, she didn't yell, she just smoothed. She'd smooth my father's anger, smooth my brother's selfishness, smooth my pain until it looked like nothing. And then there was my brother, Evan. Evan was 2 years younger than me. But in our house, he always felt older, because the world bent around him. He got the best seat, the best plate, the benefit of every doubt. He didn't have to be good, he just had to be him. I learned early what I was. I was the easy one, not the loved one, not the celebrated one, the easy one. The one who didn't cause stress, the one who could handle it, the one who could wait. At 9, Evan wanted a private baseball coach. My father paid $1,800 for a season without blinking. I wanted braces because my bottom teeth cut into my lip when I smiled. My father said, "You'll grow into your face." At 11, Evan got a new laptop because he needed it for school. I got his old one with the sticky keys. When I complained, my mother whispered, "Please don't start something." At 14, Evan failed algebra. My father hired a tutor twice a week, $65 a session, and called it an investment. When I asked for help with chemistry, my father said, "You're smart. Figure it out." At 16, Evan got his first car, a used Jeep with a dent in the bumper and a stereo system that made the driveway shake. I got rides from friends, and the bus schedule folded into my wallet like a second ID. By 17, I stopped asking for things. Not because I didn't need them, because I couldn't stand the feeling of hoping. Hope, in my house, was a setup. I did well in school anyway. I liked the quiet logic of it. Papers had rules. Exams had answers. If you worked, you could win. It wasn't like my living room where winning meant being born the right child. Senior year, I got into Virginia Tech with a partial scholarship. It covered most of my tuition, but not all. I needed $7,800 a year to make it work. Housing, fees, books. I rehearsed the conversation in my head for days. I remember the night I finally asked, because the kitchen smelled like meatloaf, my mother's announcement meal. The air was warm, the oven humming, the plates already set like we were playing the role of a family. My father sat at the table with his laptop open, numbers on the screen. Evan was scrolling on his phone, thumbs moving like the world owed him attention. I placed my acceptance letter on the table carefully, like it might shatter. I got in, I said, and my voice sounded too hopeful. And I got a scholarship, I just need help with the gap. My father didn't pick up the letter. He glanced at the top line and said, "We'll see." My mother smiled too brightly. "That's wonderful, honey." I exhaled, relieved too soon. Then my father's phone buzzed. He checked it and stood up like a man taking a call that mattered. He walked to the hallway, spoke in a low voice, then came back with a new energy. A plan, energy. "Evan's counselor sent the final numbers," he said, sitting down again. "The university wants the first payment next week." I blinked. "Evan, what numbers?" Evan looked up, finally interested. "Dad?" My father opened his laptop wider, turned it slightly so Evan could see. "We're wiring the tuition," he said. $92,600 over 4 years. It's a package. This is the career track." The air changed. I felt it in my throat, like the room suddenly had less oxygen. "Wait," I said softly. "What about my school?" My father's gaze moved to me, slow and assessing, like I was a line item. "Claire," he said, "you're a girl." I remember the way he said it. Simple. Final. Like biology was a decision. "You don't need degrees," he continued. "You just need to find a husband who can take care of you. Evan needs a career. He'll have a family to support." I stared at him. "I want a career." He smiled without warmth. "That's cute." My mother's hand touched my arm. Light. A warning touch. "Don't push." Evan didn't say a word. He watched, letting it happen, the same way he always did. Like my pain was part of the service I provided. The silence in that room was loud. I folded my letter and slid it back into my backpack. I didn't cry at the table. I didn't beg. I just nodded, like I understood. "Okay," I said. That night, I went to my bedroom and sat on the carpet. The air conditioner clicked on and off, a steady mechanical breathing. I opened my laptop and searched. Part-time jobs near Virginia Tech. I applied to 3 before midnight. That was the first night I realized something ugly and useful. In my family, love was not a feeling. It was funding, and I wasn't funded. College became a schedule, not an experience. I worked the morning shift at a cafe on Main Street, 5:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. The smell of espresso soaked into my hair. I'd rush to class with my hands still smelling like dish soap. I worked evenings at the campus library. Quiet rows, the low hum of printers. I learned to study in 2-minute chunks between checking out books. On weekends, I babysat for a professor's kids. $15 an hour, sticky fingers, cartoon voices in the background while I typed essays. I slept 4, maybe 5 hours a night. I learned how hunger changes your personality. It makes you efficient. It makes you careful. It makes you stop dreaming in big colors and start dreaming in small, practical ones. I didn't go home often. When I did, Evan's life was always expanding. New shoes, new phone, new story. My father would ask Evan about his classes like it mattered. My mother would laugh at Evan's jokes like they were oxygen, and I'd sit there with my cheap grocery store wine and the familiar feeling of being a guest in the place I'd grown up. At 20, I stopped calling my father Dad in my head. He became Peter. It helped, because if I could make him less personal, he hurt less. My anchor during those years was my Aunt Marlene, my mother's older sister. She was divorced, blunt, and the only adult in my orbit who spoke like truth mattered more than peace. She'd send me $50 here and there with notes that said, "Books are better than husbands." She'd call late at night and ask, "Did you eat today?" Like that was the real measure of success. Once, during winter break, she picked me up in her old Subaru and took me to a diner off Route 50. The booths were cracked vinyl and the coffee tasted burnt, but the waitress refilled it like she cared. Marlene slid a folded envelope across the table. "What's that?" I asked. "A start," she said. "Don't argue." Inside was $1,000 in cash. I stared at it like it was a miracle. "I can't," Yes, you can, she cut in, because your father is not a god. He's just a man who likes hearing himself talk. I swallowed hard. Why are they like this? Marlene looked out the window. The sky was gray, low, heavy. Because they're scared, she said. And because they can get away with it. Scared of what? Scared you'll become proof, she said. Proof they were wrong about you. Proof they wasted all that money on Evan. I didn't fully understand her then. But I remembered the word. Proof. It stuck to my brain. I started collecting it without even meaning to. Screenshots of texts like, "We can't help you right now." Records of my own payments. Copies of my loan statements. Every time my father sent money to Evan and said it was just temporary. I didn't know why I kept it. I only knew I felt calmer when I did. After college, I didn't go to medical school like I once dreamed. I didn't have the money or the emotional bandwidth to fight that long war. Instead, I went into compliance and auditing. I was good at it. It was the same skill I'd built in my childhood, watching patterns, tracking inconsistencies, noticing what people didn't want noticed. I got hired by a hospital network. Good benefits, stable salary, clear promotions if you did the work. And I did. By 29, I had a quiet life. A small apartment, a reliable car, a cat that trusted me. Friends who didn't ask me to shrink to make them comfortable. I didn't talk to my father much. When I did, the conversations were short and hollow. How's work? Fine. Still single? Yes. You know, you're not getting younger. Silence. He liked that part. The part where he left a sentence on the table like a weapon and waited for me to pick it up and bleed. I stopped bleeding. I started letting his words die where he put them. Then came the call that dragged me back. It was a Thursday in March. 6:14 a.m. My mother called while I was making coffee. Her voice sounded like someone trying to hold water in her hands. "Claire," she said, "Evan is engaged." I blinked. Engaged? "Yes," she said quickly, "to a girl named Brooke. Her family is... well, they have money. They have connections." I could hear my father in the background, muffled, telling her what to say. "There's going to be a dinner," my mother continued. "A big one. Your father wants... everyone." I stared at the steam rising from my mug. Does he want me or does he want the picture of me? My mother's voice tightened. "Please don't do this." "Do what?" "Make it hard," she whispered. I almost laughed. My whole life had been hard because they made it that way, but I said, "When is it?" "Saturday," she said. 7:30 p.m., the Fairfax Hunt Club. Hunt Club. Of course. And that's how I found myself, 14 years after the tuition conversation, walking back into the role I'd been born into. The invisible daughter, the quiet one, the one who should just find a husband. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would crack the family open, and what spilled out would ruin them. The first clue came from a place I didn't expect. At 9:41 a.m., the day after my mother's call, I opened an email from a bank I didn't use anymore. The subject line read, "Notice of delinquency." I stared at it. My hands went numb again, that old familiar cold. I clicked. The email said an education loan account was past due. It listed my name, my social security number, partially masked, a balance of $38,240, a payment schedule I'd never agreed to. I read it twice, then 3 times. I had loans, my loans. I knew what I owed. This wasn't mine. I logged into the portal using the forgot password link, my heart beating too fast. The screen asked security questions that were mine. Mother's maiden name, first pet, street I grew up on. They had enough of my life to impersonate it. When the dashboard loaded, I felt something inside me go very still. 2 loans. One in my name from when I was 18, mine, and one opened when I was 22. Co-signed, with an address that wasn't mine. My parents' address. The borrower listed, Evan Halston. The co-signer, Claire Halston. I didn't remember signing anything at 22. At 22, I was working 2 jobs and trying not to collapse. I would have remembered. I scrolled down and saw a PDF titled Co-Signer Authorization. I clicked it. My name was printed, my signature was there, but it wasn't my handwriting. It was a careful imitation of my handwriting, a fake that only someone close to me could attempt. The date on the document, July 18th. Timestamp on the file upload, 11:18 p.m. I felt sick. I took a screenshot and saved it. Folder name, family. I didn't know it then, but that screenshot would be the first domino. I called the bank. A woman named Sheila answered, cheerful and practiced. "Can I verify your identity?" she asked. I answered the questions, my voice flat. Then I said, "I did not sign this co-signer authorization." There was a pause. "Ma'am," Sheila said, "we have your signature on file." "I know," I said. "It's forged." Another pause. Longer. "I'm going to transfer you to our fraud department," she said, and her cheerful tone disappeared. The fraud investigator was a man named Luis. His voice was calm, the kind of calm that comes from hearing terrible things every day. "I'll need a written statement," he said, "and we'll need to open an investigation." "Okay," I said, and my own calm surprised me. He asked, "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" I stared at my kitchen wall, at the small crack near the window frame I'd been meaning to fix. "Yes," I said. "I do." After the call, I sat at my table and didn't move. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. My cat jumped onto the chair and pressed her head against my elbow. I realized something I didn't want to realize. My family didn't just deny me. They used me. They used my identity like it was a resource, like it belonged to them. And suddenly, the past didn't feel like emotional neglect. It felt like a paper trail, a criminal one. I called my Aunt Marlene. She answered on the second ring. "You okay?" I didn't bother pretending. "They took out a loan in my name." Marlene went silent. Then she exhaled. "I was wondering when you'd find it." I froze. "What?" "I found a letter once," she said slowly. "A few years ago, at your mom's house. I didn't open it. It was addressed to you. Bank logo." My throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried," she said. "Your mother cried and said she'd handle it. Your father threatened to cut me off from the family." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Cut you off from what? Their love?" Marlene didn't laugh back. "Claire," she said, "listen to me. This is your life, your credit, your future. Stop protecting them." "I'm not," I said, but the truth was, I still was. In small ways, in old ways. Marlene said, "You need an attorney." "I can't afford—" "Yes, you can," she cut in. "And even if you couldn't, you can't afford not to." She gave me a name, Harold Sutter, an attorney she'd used during her divorce. Sharp, quiet, not easily charmed. I called his office that afternoon. His assistant scheduled me for the next morning. 10:00 a.m. I spent that night gathering what I had, loan PDFs, email notices, screenshots, my own loan statements to prove the discrepancy, credit report pulls, a timeline. At 2:47 a.m., I was on my bathroom floor again. Same cold tile. Different kind of cold in my chest. I wasn't crying. I was shaking in small, controlled tremors, like my body was trying to release something my mind refused to. I whispered to myself, finally. Finally, I had proof. Finally, I didn't have to argue about feelings, because feelings were always dismissed. But documents? Documents didn't care who my father loved more. At 10 a.m., Harold Sutter shook my hand across a conference table that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. He was in his late 50s, gray hair, calm eyes, the kind of man who looked like he read contracts for fun. He listened while I explained. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said one sentence that made my stomach drop in a new way. "This is identity theft," he said. "And if you don't report it, you could be held responsible for the debt." I stared at him. "They're my parents." Harold's gaze didn't soften. "That's emotionally relevant," he said. "Legally, it's irrelevant." I nodded slowly. My hands were trembling under the table. "What do you want?" he asked. I thought about my father's voice. You don't need degrees, just find a husband. I thought about my mother's hand on my arm telling me not to start something. I thought about Evan's silence. I want my name back, I said. Harold nodded once. Then we built a record. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I requested notarized copies of the loan documents. I compared signatures. I pulled phone records to show I wasn't even in the state on the signing date. Because that July, I'd been at a work training in Richmond, hotel receipt, timestamp, work email. I screenshot everything and saved it. I created a folder on my laptop titled Evidence. Inside, subfolders, loans, texts, emails, timeline. I also started checking other areas, credit cards, utilities, anything that could be opened with a name and a family member's confidence. Then I found the second betrayal. A credit card opened when I was 24. Address, my parents' house. Balance, $12,170. Payment history, late, often. Authorized user, Evan. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. This wasn't an accident. This was a system. And suddenly, the title of my life wasn't The Daughter They Didn't Invest In. It was The Daughter They Used as Collateral. I didn't know it then, but what I found next would change the entire engagement dinner. Because my family didn't just want me there for appearances. They wanted something from me, and I was about to see exactly what. My father called 3 days before the dinner. It was 8:03 p.m. I was folding laundry. The scent of fabric softener filled my apartment, clean and artificial. "Claire," he said like my name was a task. "Peter," I replied. I never called him that out loud before, and the pause on the line told me he noticed. He ignored it. "You'll be at the dinner?" "I said I would," I answered. "Good," he said. "We need to present a united front. Brooks family values tradition." United front. Like I was a soldier, not a daughter. Then he added casually, "Also, we'll need to discuss something." I kept my voice even. "What?" He sighed. "Evan's starting a new phase. There are expenses. Brooks' father is particular. We'll talk at dinner." I could hear the manipulation already, warm and practiced. I said, "If you need money, ask Evan." The silence on the line stretched. My father's tone sharpened. "Don't be difficult." There it was, the old script. I almost said something emotional. Almost. Then I remembered. Evidence. Record. I said, "Text me what you want to discuss." He scoffed. "We're family. We don't put everything in writing." I smiled to myself, alone in my living room. Of course he didn't, because writing was where truth lived. "I'll see you Saturday," I said, and hung up. On Saturday, I prepared like it was a hearing. I wore a black wrap dress, simple, structured, not flashy. I put on small pearl studs my aunt gave me when I graduated. The only indulgence was my watch. Not expensive, just sturdy. A reminder that time belonged to me now. I placed my evidence folder in my tote bag. Hard copies, tabs, dates. My hands were steady, but my stomach felt hollow. The Fairfax Hunt Club was exactly what you'd imagine. Wood-paneled walls, leather chairs, old money portraits staring down like judges. The air smelled like whiskey and polished oak. A hostess led me to a private room. Inside, there were 34 people. Brooks' family, my family, their friends, a few business colleagues. People who laughed too loudly and kept checking their phones like they were allergic to stillness. My mother looked up when I entered. Her eyes did that thing they always did, scan my face for danger. She stood and hugged me quickly, her perfume floral and sharp. "Thank you for coming," she whispered like I was doing her a favor. My father didn't stand. He nodded once, like I was late to a meeting. Evan stood near the bar with Brooke. Brooke was beautiful in a careful way, hair smooth, smile trained. She looked like someone who'd grown up being told she was a prize. Evan's arm was around her waist like possession. He saw me, and his smile tightened. "Claire," he said, and his voice was too bright. "You made it." "Of course," I said. Brooke stepped forward. "Hi," she said warmly. "Evan's told me so much about you." I almost choked. Evan didn't talk about me, not in any way that resembled so much. But I just said, "That's nice." Dinner began with speeches. Brooke's father toasted family values. My father toasted legacy. Evan toasted new beginnings. Every word felt like a performance. Halfway through the entree, my father leaned toward me. His voice dropped, low enough to sound intimate but loud enough to feel like pressure. "We need you to co-sign something," he said. I set my fork down carefully. "No," he blinked. "Excuse me?" I said no, I repeated. My mother's hand went to her water glass. Her fingers were trembling. My father's jaw tightened. "You don't even know what it is." "I know what co-signing is," I said calmly. "And I know what you did last time." His face flashed with something: surprise, anger, calculation. Evan leaned in, voice sharp. "Can you not do this here?" I looked at him. "Do what?" "Make it about you," he said, and there it was again. The phrase that always made me feel like my existence was an inconvenience. Brooke's mother looked between us, confused. "Is everything okay?" My father smiled quickly. "Of course," he said. "Siblings. You know how it is." I let the silence sit. Then I asked, "What are you asking me to co-sign?" My father's smile stayed in place, but his eyes hardened. "A bridge loan," he said. "For the wedding, for the house. Evan and Brooke are starting their life." I turned to Evan. "If you need a loan, use your credit." Evan's face reddened. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked. He didn't answer. My father cut in, voice turning authoritative. "Claire, you don't have children. You don't have a husband. You have extra. This is what family does." The words landed in my chest like a slap. "You have extra." As if my life was a storage unit they could borrow from. As if my loneliness was a resource. I looked around the table. 34 people. Forks paused, eyes watching. Everyone pretending not to listen while they listened anyway. I felt my pulse slow, the way it did right before I spoke in a meeting. Calm, measured, precise. "I won't co-sign anything," I said. My father's smile finally cracked. "After everything we've done for you," I tilted my head slightly. "What exactly have you done for me?" The room went very quiet. That was his first mistake. I know this is a lot. If you're nodding right now, you're not alone. Hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. Comment. What would you have done in that room? My mother whispered, "Claire, please." I looked at her, and something in me softened for half a second. Then I remembered. She knew. She always knew. I asked my father quietly, "Did you forge my signature?" His face went blank. Evan's eyes widened. Brooke's expression shifted, the first real emotion I'd seen from her all night: alarm. My father said, "What are you talking about?" I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a single paper. Just one. Not the whole folder, not yet. I placed it on the table, a copy of the cosigner authorization with the signature that wasn't mine. Timestamp at the bottom. Evan swallowed hard. Brooke leaned forward, reading. Brooke's father's face darkened. My father didn't touch the paper. He didn't have to. The silence did it for him. I smiled, not happy, not smug, just controlled. I said, "Before I answer your loan request, I want to ask you something." My father's voice came out tight. "Claire, when was the last time you asked if I was okay?" I asked. He blinked like the question didn't compute. I continued, calm as glass. "When was the last time you asked how I paid for college? Or if I ever ate dinner during finals week? Or if I was alone on graduation day?" My mother's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together. Evan stared at his plate. Brooke's family looked stunned, like they'd walked into a room expecting a celebration and found a trial. My father forced a laugh. "This is not the time for drama." I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. "This is the time for facts." I opened my tote bag again. This time I pulled out the folder. The sound of the binder rings clicking open felt loud in the private room. I placed it on the table and slid it slightly forward. "I have evidence," I said. And I have a record. My father's face flushed. Put that away. I didn't. I pulled out page 1. Here's the bank's delinquency email, I said. Received at 9:41 a.m. last week, that's the timestamp. I pulled out page 2. Here's the cosigner authorization. Uploaded at 11:18 p.m. on July 18th. I pulled out page 3. Here's the hotel receipt in Richmond proving I was not at your house on that date. Check-in, 4:02 p.m. Check-out, 6:11 a.m. the next day. That's a record. Someone at the far end of the table inhaled sharply. Brooke's mother covered her mouth with her napkin. My father's hands were trembling now, small tremors in his fingers he couldn't control. He tried to take the folder. I placed my palm on it. Firm, not aggressive, just final. Don't, I said. Evan stood up too quickly, chair scraping. Claire, stop! Brooke grabbed his wrist. Evan, she said quietly, sit down. He froze. He sat. That was the first time I'd ever seen Evan obey someone else. I kept going. Here's the credit card statement, I said, and my voice stayed steady. Opened in my name when I was 24. Address, Mom and Dad's house. Authorized user, Evan. Evan's face went pale. Brooke turned slowly toward him. Is that true? Evan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He didn't answer. My father leaned forward, his voice dropping into a hiss. You're trying to humiliate us. I held his gaze. No, I said. I'm refusing to be erased. Brooke's father finally spoke. His tone was controlled, but the anger under it was clear. Peter, he said, did you commit fraud? My father's mouth tightened. This is a misunderstanding. Brooke's father said, it's a document with a forged signature. My mother whispered, Claire, please, we can talk at home. I looked at her. Home is where you kept it secret, I said. Home is where you told me to stay quiet. My mother flinched like I'd slapped her, but I didn't raise my voice. I just kept my facts sharp. I said, you didn't just refuse to pay for my education. You used my name to fund Evan's life. Evan finally snapped, voice cracking. I didn't ask for... I turned toward him. You didn't ask? I repeated softly. So you didn't know you had a card in my name? You didn't know you had a loan with me as co-signer? Evan's hands were trembling. Dad handled it. Of course he did, I said. I looked back at my father. You told me to find a husband, I said. But you didn't want me safe. You wanted me dependent, quiet, useful. My father stood up. His chair hit the wall behind him. He tried to regain authority with volume, but it came out shaky. I did what I had to do, he said. Evan needed help. And I didn't? I asked. He swallowed, jaw working. You always managed. There it was. The truth. I always managed. So they could always take. Brooke pushed her plate away slowly. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were bright with tears. Evan, she said, tell me the truth. Are you in debt? Are you using your sister's credit? Evan's voice dropped to a whisper. I thought he fixed it. Brooke's face hardened. Her father's expression turned cold, surgical. He said, this dinner is over. But my father wasn't done. He turned to me, and for a split second, I saw fear behind his anger. Raw, animal fear. Claire, he said, and his voice shifted into manipulation. After everything we've done for you, after all the food and shelter and... I cut him off with the same calm he never gave me. You did the bare minimum, I said, and you charged me for it with my dignity. The room was silent again. 30 seconds of silence that felt like a verdict. Then the door opened. A man stepped into the private room carrying a slim briefcase. Harold Sutter, my attorney. He nodded at me once, professional, calm. My father's face changed when he saw him. Not anger, not control, fear. Harold Sutter placed a sealed envelope on the table. He said, Mr. Halston, this is a formal notice. Fraud investigation, identity theft, demand for debt relief and restitution. If you attempt to pressure my client into co-signing further loans, we will treat it as harassment. My mother made a small sound, like a broken gasp. Evan whispered, Oh my God. Brooke stared at Evan like she was seeing him for the first time. My father's knees looked unsteady, like his body wanted to sit down, but his pride refused. He said, "You'd do this to your own family?" I tilted my head, then I mirrored him, the way you mirror a liar when you want them to hear themselves. "You don't need degrees," I said softly. "Just find a husband." My father flinched. I continued, "That's what you told me when I asked for an education. Now you're asking me for my name, my credit, my future." He shook his head, voice breaking. "I was trying to protect you." I almost smiled. "Protect me from what?" I asked. "Being successful?" My father's face crumpled. He tried one last tactic, authority. "Claire," he said louder, "sit down." I stayed standing. Then he tried desperation. His eyes glistened. His hands trembled openly now, no longer contained. "Please," he said. "I'm begging you. I'm scared. You don't understand what this will do to us." I believed him. For the first time in my life, I believed he was scared. Not of losing me, of consequences. I took a slow breath. I said, "I understand perfectly." Then I gave him my decision. 4 words. The 4 words that ended the conversation, ended the power dynamic, ended the story he'd been telling himself about who I was. I looked at him and said, "Find yourself a son." Silence. Even the air felt still. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brooke's father stood and said, "Harold, let's go." Brooke stood too. She placed her napkin neatly on the table and looked at Evan. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I need space," she said, "and I need truth." Evan's face fell apart. He looked at me, eyes wet. "Claire." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. What happened next changed everything. Because once you stop protecting someone, the truth rushes in like water. I gathered my folder calmly. I slid it back into my tote bag. I thanked Brooke's parents for listening. I nodded to my attorney. Then I walked out. No screaming, no dramatics. Just the click of my shoes on the wood floor and the strange lightness of finally leaving. Before I got to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from my Aunt Marlene. "Proud of you. Keep going." And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trembling from fear. I was trembling from freedom. I sat in my car for 20 minutes with my hands on the steering wheel. The parking lot lights cast pale circles on the asphalt. My breath came out slow, controlled. Then I cried. Not loud, not messy, just steady tears that felt like pressure leaving a sealed container. My attorney called the next morning at 8:22 a.m. He said, "The bank is taking this seriously. The credit card company is too. We'll need statements, a notarized affidavit, and then my family will hate me." I finished. Harold paused. "Yes," he said, "and you'll be legally protected." 3 days later, my mother called. Her voice was sharp, angry, but underneath it was panic. "You've destroyed this family," she said. I held the phone away from my ear for a second, then brought it back. I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't forge my signature," I said. My mother snapped. "Your father was trying to help Evan." "You mean you were trying to help Evan?" I corrected softly. "You both were." She went quiet. Then she said, very small, "He could go to jail." I closed my eyes. The old part of me, the trained part, wanted to fix it, smooth it, make it easier. But I was done being the family's unpaid labor. "I'm not responsible for what he did," I said. "I'm responsible for what I do next." My mother whispered, "Please, just come over. Let's talk." I pictured their house, the kitchen table, the meatloaf smell, the silence that swallowed me whole. "No," I said. "Not without my attorney." She hung up. Evan texted me that night. 12:11 a.m. "I didn't know, I swear. Dad said it was handled. Please don't do this." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I screenshotted it. Saved. Record. I replied with one line. "Get your own lawyer." Over the next month, the consequences moved like dominoes. Brooke postponed the wedding indefinitely. Her family didn't want their name attached to fraud. Evan moved back into my parents' house. My father's job placed him on administrative leave pending investigation because fraud isn't charming when it's documented. The bank froze certain accounts, and the house that once felt like a fortress started to feel like a trap. A cousin I barely spoke to called me and whispered, "Your dad's been drinking. He looks small." Small, that was the word. For years, my father seemed enormous because I was trained to shrink. But when I stopped shrinking, he was just a man who made decisions. And now he had to live with them. My unexpected victory didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly. The bank removed the fraudulent loan from my credit. My score recovered. My breathing got deeper. I started sleeping through the night. At work, I applied for a director role I'd been too afraid to aim for. I got it. Higher salary, better benefits, a door with my name on it. I started therapy. The first session, the therapist asked, "What brings you here?" And I said, "I'm trying to learn how to exist without being useful." 6 months later, my mother sent a message that wasn't an accusation. It was short. "I'm sorry." I stared at it. I didn't reply right away, because apology without action is just another manipulation. 2 years later, I heard through Marlene that my father had sold the house, that my parents downsized to a small condo, that Evan finally got a job that didn't require pretending, and that my father didn't talk about legacy anymore. He talked about mistakes. I didn't feel joy about that. I felt peace. I'm Claire Halston, and that dinner was the last time I let my family treat my silence like consent. I still keep the folder, not because I enjoy remembering, because it reminds me of something I spent years forgetting. I am allowed to protect myself. There's a small symbol I keep on my desk now, a plain sticky note with one word written in black ink: record. It doesn't mean I live paranoid, it means I live awake. If you're watching this and nodding, you know what I'm talking about. You know what it feels like to be the easy one, the strong one, the one who always manages, so everyone else feels entitled to take. So here's what I learned. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up. Silence isn't peace. It's just postponed pain. And you don't owe anyone your life, not even the people who gave it to you. Some of you are thinking, was that too harsh? Let me answer that the way I wish someone had answered it for me when I was 18, holding an acceptance letter like it was a confession. No. People who dismiss your dreams don't get to borrow your future. People who use you as a resource don't get to call it love. And if someone hears your boundaries and calls you selfish, that's not a sign you're wrong. That's a sign they benefited from you having none. If this story spoke to you, leave a comment. Tell me, what boundary changed your life? And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the moment. There are more stories to tell. Take care of yourself. Really, I mean it.